Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am King Pigley. This is Gaming Imperfectly, the most imperfect channel on YouTube, and welcome. And if you're new to the channel, I am King Pigley, and I hope you like what you see. Guys, we're going into more Missing 411 today. It's a book series by a guy named David Politis. David was a police officer for over 30 years, police detective. When he retired, he got into writing books about missing person cases here in the United States and Canada, and also around the world. And he started noticing like a tremendous amount of people just go missing every year in wilderness areas and national parks under mysterious conditions. And that is exactly what today's case is. It's a head scratcher, I promise. So stick around because I want to hear what you have to say about it. Back in 1998, guys, there was a young fellow by the name of Raymond Matlock. And Ray left his hometown in Texas to move to the Pacific Northwest, to Washington State, in fact, to become a fisherman. He wanted to be a fisherman, and so he left his hometown in Texas, left his mother and his brother down there, and moved to the Pacific Northwest. And he loved it. That's what he wanted to do, and that's what he did. He also had a true passion for hunting. July 7th, 1998, Raymond and a couple of his buddies got together and made plans to go out elk hunting down by the Bone River. It sounded like a great time, and being a big fan of hunting himself, Ray was all geared up for it and ready to go. Now, the thing that fascinates me about hunters going missing, guys, is that they're well armed, they're generally in good shape, and even if they're not, the fact that most of them are accomplished outdoorsmen that are armed to the teeth with a working firearm and just evaporate into nothingness is awfully strange to me. And this case really follows that same vein. I mean, you have a 28-year-old young man who's completely adept at being in nature and loves hunting and has gone numerous times. And suddenly he goes into the wilderness of the Olympic State Park region of the Pacific Northwest, and he vanishes. His friends said they looked for him. When they went out hunting on November the 7th in 1998, they eventually somehow got separated. It's not really clear how, and the reports don't really say much. And that's another thing about these cases that make them so baffling, is that the response time and what the authorities do when these people go missing, or sometimes how little details are in these case reports. It seems to be how little they care. And maybe that's the case on national forestry land. Maybe the government doesn't give a crap when somebody goes missing in national parks. I don't know. I do know that when Raymond went missing, not much was said about it. His friends came out of the woods and said, hey, Raymond's gone missing, and we've looked for him and can't find him. And they got everybody involved. A big search happened. And of course, during this big search, eventually weather went bad, but they couldn't find any sign, hide nor hair, of Raymond. The only thing they found of Raymond after a 2-week-long search almost was Raymond's hat. They found his hat on the ground. But that was it. No weapon, his firearm's never been found, nothing of Raymond's has ever been found, just his hat. So they called off the search, and they just kind of let it be because the weather came in and they really couldn't do anything. 2 months later, they initiated another search for Raymond, looking in the same area in a huge swath of land, but there was no sign of him. Again, after a few weeks and putting money into it and resources with helicopters and dogs and everything else, no sign of Raymond was ever found other than the hat they had found initially. So they just kind of chalked it up to Raymond getting lost in the woods and wandering off. But how much sense does that make, considering that this guy is an accomplished outdoorsman? I mean, guys, if you spend any time outdoors, whether you're a hunter or whatever, if you go hiking, if you're an outdoorsman, you know as well as I do that looking at a tree or looking at the sun or looking at which way the wind's blowing all can tell you directions. Not to mention, there's a river there called the Bone River. And all rivers lead one direction or another. And generally, if you follow water, you're going to find civilization. You're going to find safety. Well, in this case, apparently this very accomplished outdoorsman, who was Raymond Matlock, didn't do any of those things and just vanished. But this story doesn't end there. Unfortunately, because Raymond just disappeared, Ray's mother had no closure. And that must be absolutely horrific. And for years, she'd had no clue of what happened to her son in Washington State. There was a lot of speculation in this, that, and the other, but there was nothing that really could be proven one way or the other. And so Mrs. Matlock just had no understanding of what happened to her boy. And to make things worse, in 2007, her other son, William, Raymond's brother, was killed in a car accident. And so she ended up losing both her sons. However, the world being what it is, and also not always being a dark, terrible, festering turd of horror, like 2020 was for the most part, there's also some great things that happen in this world. There's some light, and there's some kindness, and there's the milk of human kindness shines through on occasion. And this is one of those times. Because up in Canada, there was a forensic expert whose true passion was taking cases that had unidentified bodies and identifying them. And there was this one case to where she had the skull of a body that was found 18 years before, and she wanted to find out who it was. So with much facial reconstruction and DNA analysis and everything that goes into it, lo and behold, she was actually holding the skull of Raymond Matlock. Now, here's why this case is so weird, and this is what makes it a head scratcher. Washington State is south of Canada, guys. For Raymond to get to where his body was found, okay, please understand this because this is really weird. Raymond's body was actually found, guys, not long after he went missing. In fact, Raymond's body was found a week after he went missing by Canadian authorities, 125 miles north of where he went missing. So that means that Raymond, in the woods, had to fall into the Bone River, get washed out to sea, then float 125 miles north, and then 10 miles into a strait to be found where his body was actually located. It is ridiculous. As you guys know, if you've watched some of my other videos, guys, I'm prior service. I was in the United States Navy, and I know just a tad bit about the ocean and currents and how water works. Just a wee bit. And I can honestly tell you that it's not impossible for a body to drift north on currents, but the way the currents work in Washington State to Alaska, it's highly improbable for that body to drift like it did to end up where it did, and especially considering there was no animal predation. Fish, shark, killer whales, leopard seals, anything in that area that decides, boy, that looks tasty. Mackerel, tuna, I don't know, pick a fish. Guys, they'll all eat you. They don't care. And none of them had touched Raymond. Raymond's body was relatively in good shape when they found him. They couldn't take fingerprints off of him because his body had been in water for a very long period of time. But I'll tell you this much, guys. Something happened to Raymond in those woods. Still unknown to this day. The going theory is that when he got separated from his buddies, Raymond slipped, fell into the Bone River, and drowned, or died of hypothermia, and ended up washed out to sea. I don't necessarily buy that. So much time had passed between his remains, which, again, his body was buried. They kept the skull out because in unidentified cases, they generally do that. They'll actually inter the body or bury the body in a John Doe grave or a Jane Doe grave, and then they keep the skull aside, and every once in a while, some forensic expert will take a look at it to see if they can try to figure out who it was. Most of the time, they stay John Does or Jane Does. But in this particular case, in Raymond's case, the lady could actually figure it out. And that was actually a very good thing, because it gave closure to Raymond's mother, who had wondered for 18 years what had happened to her son. And also, after losing her other son, it really did actually help her, knowing that at least Raymond is okay moving on to the other world, that kind of stuff. You know, she had a devout belief in God, and so she believed, of course, that Raymond was in heaven and that all things worked out the way they were supposed to. But it still doesn't stop the fact that if it happened that way, Raymond floating 25 or 125 miles north on ocean currents without being eaten by any type of animal, and then floating 10 miles into a strait to be found where he was at in a week time. That's the other side. That's the really strange thing right there too, guys. It's a week. You know, Raymond's body, this isn't Daniel Radcliffe in, you know, Pocket Knife Man kind of thing. You know, Raymond didn't turn into a sea-doo. All right? It wasn't fast travel. So if his body did indeed float against currents at times up north to end up where it did, it is an amazing feat of nautical science that's beyond me. I don't know, guys. I'd love to hear what you think about this case. I mean, what happened to Raymond? You know, why do people just suddenly get disoriented in woods? Like in the Terrence Johnson case. I mean, what made a man just run off into the woods? You know, why? And where he was never seen again. So what happens to these people out there? What's going on into the national parks of North America? I'd love to hear your opinion. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash in that like button. It really helps me out. And by clicking the like button, that lets me know I might be doing a good job. So please, smash in that like button. Also, if you are new to the channel and you've been here this long, please consider subscribing. Keep coming back. Smash in that bell. And if you're subscribed, I hope you've smashed in that bell. That way you won't miss out on the next video. But that's it for King Piggly today. I'm out of here. And I will see you guys in the next video.